Say It Loud Network presents Corner Table Talk.
Hello and welcome to Corner Table Talk. Today my guest is the lovely chef Nyesha Arrington, my LA homie. What's up?
Boom. I'm just living the dream, Brad. I'm so happy and honored to be sharing the space with you today.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, you've been living that dream and sharing it with the rest of us generously. So for those of you, a lot of the folks who are tuning in here will know who you are, but those of you who might not, Nyesha is just a phenomenal chef, LA born and raised. She comes from a mixed heritage, which is really interesting. I want to dive into that a little bit, Korean and African American, but she has worked in some of the most esteemed kitchens and with some of the most incredible chefs, including someone who she attributes as a mentor to her, Josiah Citron, and also the legendary chef Joel Robuchon. You've worked with both of these fancy fellows, and I'm sure gained a lot of very valuable experience along the way. I've known Nyesha for a number of years. Anybody who's been in and around LA for any number of years and has followed food and restaurants and the evolution of restaurants in Los Angeles would be very familiar with Chef Nyesha Arrington. So, Chef, welcome to the Corner Table. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So I'm going to start off with what I call our short order questions, just to fire a couple of things at you and get you rolling. All right.
Okay.
You ready for that?
Let's go.
All right. Substitutions or no substitutions?
Depends on the dish.
On
the menu. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think in this day and age, you got to be malleable 100%. I think like in the 90s, like chefs could get away with it, but I think 2000s, everyone's got food allergies, dietary restrictions. I think, sure, like the artist brain side of me is like, no substitutions. It's perfect as it is. But the pragmatic consumer facing side of me is like, I get it. Like, you can't eat avocado or whatever, I get it. So yeah.
Accommodate.
Yeah, I think so. I think, in the hospitality business, you got to do it.
I'm down with that. Favorite city?
Ooh, favorite city. Favorite city, I'm going to have to say, wow, so many going through my mind because I don't think it's just particular to, our great nation. I'm going to say Tel Aviv was amazing, really full of life. Got a pretty awesome tattoo in Tel Aviv. And, I experienced the culture there and, it was amazing. Tel Aviv was like it felt like a young, fun city, but like such deep roots. And it was a beautiful experience to kind of travel and hang out there.
Wow, that sounds amazing. What inspired the tattoo?
Well, thank you for asking, actually. So I went to Jerusalem prior to Tel Aviv, and I visited this place called the Ramon Crater. And they say it's the most spiritually, like electrically charged place in the universe. And so, Brad, when I tell you this, like, it's just insane. Like I was with a big group, maybe 20 people, and we went out to the desert, middle of nowhere, where there's no lights, we drove long time and it's just pitch black. I remember like looking around, but then thinking to myself, like, wow, I need to not even be looking linear. I need to be looking up. Like, this is like, the closest, you're supposed to like, it's the shortest amount of space to outer space, essentially. So when I looked up, like, I felt like I was in the galaxy. Like there were like shooting stars everywhere. Just the sky was just alive with shooting stars and like all the like constellations you could see, like they were a light bulb. And, I just remember that moment. I was like, wow, like it really puts into perspective, like, our life journey as like human beings on this planet, because I remember seeing the Big Dipper. And then it took me back to being in my front yard with my dad and my sister. And he would always like point out the signs for us. And my sister and I would call them out in the sky. And I remember I always looked for a Big Dipper. And then when I saw it that day, like it was such a full circle moment for me. And so I remember that, when I got to Tel Aviv, I was just like being a tourist walking around and there was a dope tattoo shop. And I just wanted to go in there and get like an earring or something. And I ended up telling this lady the story. She was like, oh, it's amazing. And then she was showing me her artwork. And I said, what, I'm going to go ahead and get that on my arm. And because it was so, a life anchor, it was like 2 moments in time that were fused together by one anchor being the Big Dipper. That never changed. That was there. But as a kid, it felt so far away. And it was just this place that, over there. But when I was in Jerusalem, really, where I saw this, it seems so tangible. I'm telling you, like, it looked like light bulbs in the sky, and like, it was an amazing moment. Yeah.
Wow. All that beautiful vision, and she can cook too. All right. So, now I know you're a snowboarder, so share with us your best memory snowboarding.
Wow. 100%. I really love seasons, right? Because I think in LA, we're a little spoiled here. Like, we don't get a lot of snow and all the things. So I really value being able to go to the snow. But I was with this family in Aspen, and there was the most epic powder that I've ever snowboarded in my whole life. Because, here we go to Big Bear, go to Mammoth, or, Utah has great snow. But when I went to Aspen, like, I never experienced conditions like that. And being able to snowboard on like powdered sugar was like amazing. It was amazing. That's definitely my favorite snowboard trip.
I went snowboarding years ago with my son at Whistler's. The first time I had ever. I'm a New York City kid. I didn't grow up snowboarding, and I did not do well. So that'll be a conversation for another time.
Fair.
Nicest beach.
What about? Oh, nicest beach? Nicest beach is my favorite. Oh my gosh. Wow, I'm a beach girl, man. I have been on the West Coast, on the West Side for about 20 years now in LA. But wow, that's hard. Nicest beach. I'll have to say I used to live in the Caribbean, and with Connie. What Connie got me, and I would say I was on an island called St. Kitts, but we went to Anguilla, and when I went there, I remember seeing this like turquoise water. I could picture it like I was there right now. It's like, these are those moments that you don't even take photos of, because it's like, you know what I mean? You just got to like blink and like let that live in your soul. And that was one of those moments, because it was like, I was like in my 20s maybe. And I remember being on that island, and the guy who took me to the island, Pilot Mike, he was an Anguillan guy. He was of the island. Like, there's very lax rules in the British Virgin Islands, So it was funny because I left the island. I apparently wasn't supposed to, because, it's like you have to have a different passport. So I had to like hustle to get my way back in the island. That's a different story. But anyways, this beach, when I saw it, it was like turquoise, sparkle crystal water with not a wave in sight, just still. And this like sugar sand, just sparkly. And then like two white sailboats that were just like, couldn't have been on this same time frame, just in their own time. And that's definitely one of my favorites.
And something to the point that you raised, the experience sometimes doesn't require a photograph, right? It's what you remember of it, how you hold that memory and cherish that memory is just, that's special to you. And the way you described it, we get it. I get it. I'm there with you. So
right?
That's enough. Yeah. Lockdown lifted, safety protocols in place.
Yes.
It's Tuesday night. You're in Los Angeles, and you're not working. You have the night off. Where's the first place you're going for a meal, and what are you ordering?
Wow. Probably I'm going to go to K-Town. I love me some Korean barbecue. I'm probably going to have to make it a crawl, because like I would go Korean barbecue at Parks, and then I will probably go get some like oxtail dumplings in like the deep K-Town. I love Asian flavors. So then K-Town's a whole vibe. So I'll probably go ahead and do that.
Are you a beer drinker, or are you more cocktails?
Generally cocktails, but if I'm in like Korean barbecue and like, where it makes sense to like drink beers, I could hang with beers, but it's not my number one choice.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. So shifting gears, thank you so much, Nyesha, for agreeing to be a guest here. The last year, 2020 was just incredibly difficult. So much going on, pandemic, the racial justice protests, and just what we watched, what we saw, what we observed. It was just a lot for us all to process and still process. I know some folks, we sold Post and Beam to John and Ronnie Cleveland in the summer of 2019. And folks said to me, oh man, you got out right, just in time. And I think what folks, and I'll pose this in the form of a question to you. What folks don't understand is that this is our industry. You don't leave it. It's always a part of you. And we've been mentoring and coaching along John and Ronnie. So, I'm very much a part of it. Yes, I feel that their struggle is different than mine, but watching it from the sidelines has also been difficult. I'm just curious, how are you holding up? What's your take on that? How are your friends in the business doing? Former staff? You keeping in touch with folks? What's going on?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Brad. And just shout out to John and Ronnie, because they just are lovely humans, and I've been able to curate some cool events with them. And, knowing that legacy, meeting you back when it was Posts and Beams, literally, and them stepping in, and
that's right. It was Golden Bird, actually. Yeah, the first time you walked in there.
So like to now, and then seeing them, it's just like, I feel like that's like fam, so yeah, just mad respect to them. But yeah, I mean, I have to say, I haven't had more conversations in 2020 with hospitality folk than in the whole previous 10 years of my life. Just staying on the phone, talking to people, doing a lot of conferences, a lot of, when the IRC was built out, the Independent Restaurant Coalition, I was definitely a lot of hands in on that because, yeah, to your point, I left my restaurant and closed it in 2019, because it just didn't seem like the long-term, plan. It just wasn't the right fit. So I definitely feel like, a lot of, industry folk and chef were like, we don't know what to do, and so I think I had a different perspective, being that, I was still working, doing stuff more virtually, but, through the social unrest, unjust and the restaurant closures and the reopenings and all the things, what I found out to be the common denominator most, and I'll be honest, is mostly, especially with my male counterparts, is it was hard to have empathy, because the chef industry and culture is a lot of it is rooted in, hard work, right? Like it's rooted in hard work, and a lot of those softer emotions get put to the wayside a lot of times, in the back of the house, especially because it's just go, go, go. Everyone's focused. Of course it's a healthy environment, but everyone's focused on their task at hand. And that's about it. So I think a lot of emotions were healing, as the restaurants reopened, as they closed, as people were trying to pivot and maneuver and learn and adapt. And, it was a roller coaster. And so I think it was hard for people to, that was the biggest challenge, obviously financially, monetarily. And, but I think really, especially emotionally, for me, in my coming up, empathy and, things like that were not valued emotions coming up, so it was more just armor, I came up in the French regime though. But I think, we're in a very interesting transition, because we see a lot of, tech and, big business in terms of restaurant business doing well, right? They're doing well. And a lot of the quote unquote mom and pops or single owner operator businesses are being faced with a lot of challenges, because to pivot, it also costs money, and I think that's what's interesting to the person who's not of the restaurant industry, to close to start up is so hard, because it's like a lawnmower, it's like, you gearing that thing up and then it goes, and it takes months sometimes to get that centrifugal force happening in the soul, that intangible energy of a restaurant is not something you can flip on and off with a light switch. And so it's challenging, to see that, right? So, I think we've seen a lot of the menus kind of be tailored to slim down, right? We're seeing more micro concepts come out where it's just like one thing done well. Well, we just do chicken sandwiches and it's this sauce, blah, 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 blah. Not naysaying it or praising it. It's just people had to adapt and bring down their overhead. So yeah, I mean, now, I was in New York last week and it's like dining is almost that, like every space that I was walking down was full, everyone was, I think it's 35% capacity now. And, what a different energy I felt last week than here, in my hometown. And, yeah, it's hard because, I have a circle of friends that I work out with who are chefs, and man, I mean, I'm nose, ear to the ground every day with my friends and in food media as well. And so I've really just tried to do what I can to try to help raise capital, do, fundraising dinners. We saw a lot of like consumers come through and really support delivery. But I see most of the headlines I'm reading are like about the delivery apps right now and how that is affecting the bottom line of these single owner operator restaurant businesses.
Yeah, I want to touch on that. I want to come back to it, but I also want to, and I'll come back to another point that you raised because I want to dig into that a little bit deeper because you talked about the French regime and I know the culture of kitchens, and as a woman of color, having come up in the back of the house, basically, I'm sure that you've seen a few things. So, but I'll come back to that. Some of the issues that you just raised, Nyesha, they were in the pipeline prior to COVID, right? I mean, the whole issue around minimum wage, and you talk especially for independent operators like the world that we come from, which are I believe are the heart and soul of the restaurant industry, right? We need these places. We can't lose them, right? But staff shortages, there's some degree of market saturation, and you can argue that whether or not immigration policies have negatively impacted the availability of staff, or, in our case, as African-American operators, we also see some challenges with trying to entice African-Americans into the service industry. So out of control rent, outdated service models, some of the things that you just, and again, as independent operators, how do we afford healthcare? When Cheesecake Factory and some of the large, they can pay bonuses and healthcare, and it's very hard for us to do that. But you mentioned the delivery space, and I'm very curious to get your feeling on that because we're seeing this proliferation of ghost kitchens. And as someone who sets the table, sets the mood in the room, you deliver your food hits the table, and there's a whole experience around that, right? Being in a Nyesha Arrington restaurant.
100%.
How does a ghost kitchen and food and delivery system, how does that stack up in your mind? How does that experience, how does your food hit the same table and hit the table in the same way?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a fascinating topic of conversation that's so hot right now. And I see it because I've been on both sides of the tablecloth, of the proverbial tablecloth, so to speak, with the high touch white linen down to the throwaway napkin and compostable knife and fork. Like I've seen it, from toe to toe. So like, I think it's interesting. First of all, there's a cartoon movie called Wall-E, and like basically by the end of it, people are like driving around in these like automated cars and like the food just comes to them and it's like they're just eating, and like it's like I just feel like that's where we're heading as a society, dude. And so, it's just so I think that's one part, right? I think if we're thinking about this like compartmentalized, I think social media, I think the implementation of the internet and the digital space in, late 90s, really we saw it super bubble. It's just been a constant trend of progress in the digital space and tech space. And then I think, all these companies that we're seeing emerging are seeing niche markets and these opportunities to get in where they fit in, so to speak. And, I think the argument is, before the delivery model was like, Domino's Pizza, Pizza Hut, like those are the people who were delivering, right? You get delivered pizza. That's all I really remember. Maybe Chinese food, right? And some Indian stuff like that. But like there was never these apps and like, third party services. So I think the interesting thing is like, and the argument that I hear a lot is like from both sides is like, well, would that business have come through your door if it wasn't brought by the third party? And that's the justification of the 35% or 20 or whatever they're charging that entity. So, from a neutral standpoint, I see it all. From an artist and curator and a storyteller and a lover of hospitality, to welcome someone at your dinner table is to show them utmost sign of love and respect for another human being, right? To nurture another soul is such a selfless act. And it's not for everyone, right? It's certain people think about that and it makes them feel warm and tingly inside. I'm one of those people, right? Like that's what life's about from generation to generation, because then it's like, what does the conversation of food look like 300 years from now? Like, is that a lost art? And so I think, for me, being a person who loves experiential, right? Because 9 times out of 10, we're not thinking about that anniversary or that work accolade. We're thinking about how we felt, right? It wasn't the physical date on the calendar. It was like, oh, we were in Paris at blah, blah, blah. And we had that amazing champagne and that caviar, whatever. It's the food memories and that data that lives in the soul that we can transfer to our next of kin, our loved ones, our friends, share moments in time that make us human, right? I think that's so important. That makes us real, So I think it's so interesting because I think it's layered. I honestly think that these micro concepts and things like ghost kitchens can be, if you're looking at it from like a pillar standpoint, I think it could be a branch, right, in the root system. I don't think, for me, it's like I put all my eggs in that, and I feel good about what I'm putting out because that's just, a machine could do that. Like, I think it's like if, for example, if I have a menu and I know that my lamb belly wontons are my number one seller and I could do the math and I can crank them out and sell them on Gold Belly, get them in as many people's houses as possible. And I use a ghost kitchen for that. That makes sense, or if I'm trying to create a CPG line or like a sauce off that, I think those are the avenues you can take to do that.
More as an ancillary
Correct.
business opportunity than the main. Yes, I like that. And I'm encouraged to hear that on your recent visit to New York that you saw the dining rooms full, because that's been a conversation that we've had. Are we about to hit the roaring 20s, or are people going to be reluctant to be in spaces again because of COVID and the fear of, being in a crowded room and breathing the same air or sharing plates? But you saw vibrant dining rooms.
Brad, so here's the interesting thing, right? Because I was there for about a week, 6 days, and I'm very cautious, right? I'm not like living in a bubble, but I'm definitely aware. I'm just, I'm a back of the house girl. Like, I'm already sanitizing and being aware anyways. So, so just as an observer in New York and also, a visitor, it was interesting because I saw both sides of the spectrum, right? One interesting moment was when I was in my hotel. I'd probably been there for 2 days or so. And this gentleman, the elevator door opens. And it actually hadn't crossed my mind prior, because they have the little social distance thing. It's a pretty big elevator. And so, you have 4 people in it at a time. And I went to get on the elevator. There's one single person in the elevator. And the door opens and I politely go to step in and he puts his hand up, basically in front of my face. And he's like shaking his head, like, don't come in here. I'm like, wow, like that was like jarring, I was like, oh, okay. I'm just like living in my little bubble, like life, like everything's fine and happy all the time. And I was like, whoa, so, there's people that.
Well, what was that about?
I don't know. I don't know. To this day, I was like, let me just at least use your words. Be like, oh, you know what I mean? Just say something. Just stand up in someone's face like that. So that, and then, going to, my buddy, has a restaurant there called Lucali, and, he's in Brooklyn. He's probably got 10 seats in the restaurant, pretty small space, some outdoor stuff, open kitchen. And I mean, that's the energy in that space was so healing. He has a wood fired oven. Oh, it was just so lovely. So lovely. The hospitality was lovely. You could see the joy on the maitre d' and the service staff and the chef and the team. Like, it was just, it was like a ballet, you're witnessing this, beautiful symphony.
Yeah.
And,
we miss that, man. I know folks miss it. I do.
It's giving me chills just talking about it. Candlelight and just beautiful wine and it's beautiful. Yeah, it's interesting. And everyone's, from the diner's perspective, me being a diner in that space, everyone seemed very happy to be there.
That's so nice to hear, man. I love hearing that. So going back to LA, and let's just kind of revisit what the world in LA, the food world in LA looked like pre-pandemic. I've been living in LA for 30 years, born and raised in New York. And from the time that I moved to LA, when it was basically the dining scene was Ivy at the Shore or Ivy on Robertson and maybe a Wolfgang Puck restaurant, but not much more, to what it has become, which in my opinion, and I'm curious to hear if you agree, I think LA is leading the culture in food and creativity and, just it's an exciting environment. How do you see LA, the food scene in LA? And again, we're looking at it pre-pandemic and hopefully post-pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, wonderful question, and one that I'm very passionate about, as I've been here a long time, right? And I think really the conversation is also, right, there's exciting food. There's no freaking doubt. Like everyone in the nation wants to be in LA. You see a lot of New York chefs coming to LA. For me, coming up as a young culinarian, people were always like, you got to go to New York to cut your teeth. When you could survive in the New York kitchens, then you get taken seriously. And now we see it's flipped, for multiple reasons. I think people just want a quality of life. It seems like people can have a little bit of different, I don't know, I don't know, but I know what people have told me. And a lot of my friends have come here from New York, actually. During the pandemic, a lot of people left New York to come here. But I think from a food perspective, I think what we were talking about also is a pre-Jonathan Gold world and a post-Jonathan Gold world as well.
Our beloved food critic who we lost.
Yeah, yes. Because he really was able to antithesis what the culture of food is. His dialogue was just for me, in my humble opinion, just really spot on, because he didn't only go to the Ivies at the Shores and write about them, or the opulence, life, Hollywood, Dantana's, all these places. He talked about the San Gabriel Valley dumpling shop too, and and put a lot of restaurants on the map.
With reverence. Not just stopping in, like he was a regular customer at those places there.
Exactly. And just a beautiful soul. For me, he was always my muse, when I was create, and I always think, cause I respect him, and I know, other than my dad and a couple other people, really, I'm a very linear person. And so a lot of other people are just kind of cast of characters, but this man, he really, I got to meet his family and his son and sit with his wife and just really understand his brain from a creative standpoint and a writing standpoint and obviously a food standpoint. But he's just not one of those wafty people. He has an internal root system about himself that I respect. So, I was fortunate. This is one of those didn't take a picture moments, but I just sat in my soul. But 2 weeks before he passed, we were on a farm, and it was a long dinner table. The chef was here from Peru, and he was doing a dinner, and he motioned for me to sit next to him, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm sitting next to John Gold right now. This is amazing, but it felt so that's what had needed to happen in that moment in time. It felt so organic, and so, his wife was across and his son, and we all sat, and, I'll never forget the topic of conversation was, about mashed potatoes and about if a technique is a technique, or is the chef who made it, is that who makes that technique, right? And then I brought up the point of, yes, I think, for example, the Robuchon potato, when you say that mashed potato, that's a specific style of cooking. That's not just any mashed potato. But anyway, I think that the food culture in Los Angeles is sort of akin to the Wild West, in that anything is possible, in the most beautiful way, and I especially am proud to see a lot more of the flavors and cultures and cuisines of, just not only European descent getting the limelight. It's so beautiful to see so much Filipino food, African cuisine, Ethiopian, Latin, all these other flavors coming out, and being celebrated. Because before, when I was coming up, I feel like those restaurants, unless Jonathan Gold was talking about them, they were not really being talked about, or those flavors were being served at family meal, but not on the menu,
As you're saying that, and I've been a fan of Jonathan Gold, and he was very kind to Govind and I at Post and Beam. But as you're saying that, I understand a little bit more clearly how Jonathan was in large part responsible for being the driving force behind the food scene evolving the way that it did. He brought pride to the corners of that world that really hadn't had the exposure. And for people like yourself who, have been in the front end and leading, and people love your food and love your places, and hearing the fact that you were inspired in that way, it really kind of crystallized that thought for me about him and how he was central to all of that.
Absolutely. And I remember, when I opened my first restaurant, he was like, I remember the first time I met him. Oh, wow, this is such a full circle moment because I met Marcus for the first time at Post and Beam when Govan was there. But then when I met Jonathan Gold for the first time, Marcus was, he was interviewing Marcus and he's like, oh, come through. And so we were all walking down the street. It was dark. And he said, oh, do you know Chef Nyesha Arrington? And I'm like, this guy doesn't know who I am. And he's like, yes, of course. I know Chef Nyesha. I'm like, oh my God, you know.
You do?
So cool.
Well, it's funny. A little funny segue. So I had Nyesha in my sights from way back. And when we first got the space at the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza that became Post and Beam, it was a former Golden Bird location. And I contacted Nyesha and she was gracious enough. You had just gotten back from the islands.
Wow.
I remember tracking you down and you were just getting off a plane and you almost came from LAX and you met me and we stood around and the place was dilapidated and, the area has grown up quite a bit since then. But, I certainly was interested in you from back then, but, we've stayed close and, you've done some pretty cool things since then. I want to turn to your family. And I read that you come from an artistic family. I know your dad has been very influential, but your last name, you've got some musicians in your family. I read that you've got a bass player, you've got a drummer, and I'm just curious. This is a stretch, and I know I've never asked you this before, but any relation to Steve Arrington from the group Slave?
I don't think so, but my dad has definitely talked
some
about
of those records.
Are you kidding me? No, music was the biggest influence in my life growing up as a kid, man. I'm so grateful for that because I just adore music. I adore vibes. I think that's why I'm in food, But yeah, I mean, my dad, he used to play with the Brothers Johnson.
No way.
Yeah. So those are his cousins. And so when I was a kid, we used to go hang out with Quincy Jones, Brothers Johnson and it was so cool, man. I remember that being a little girl, going up and seeing this just amazing property. They're very faint memories, but just I remember, those are my first cognitive thoughts, some of them that I can retain, And, but yeah, I mean, Saturday, Sunday mornings were always spent with my parents cooking and we'd always have grits, eggs, bacon, and my dad would make Biscuit pancakes or biscuits or something. And we'd always have funk music on every morning. And it was his vibe. He's a bass player. He's a slap bass player and a very talented human being. My dad is definitely my best friend and my love. I mean, he's such an honorable human and man, he's always been such a good dad to me and my sister and just really taught us that we can do anything we want. He really empowered us with life tools as kids, put us in team sports. We did martial arts. We played ping pong, table tennis all the time. Just things that help you brain development, and he always told us, aim for the moon and hit the fence post, but don't aim for the fence post and hit the dirt. And he would always say that.
I want to stay on your dad for a minute because I read that he gave you a pretty instrumental book in your life called The Four Agreements. And it's described as a practical guide to personal freedom. And freedom from self-limiting beliefs that may cause suffering and limitation in a person's life. And when I think about someone like you, who's so unique and gifted and talented and all that, but you're an attractive person. I would think that in some ways, maybe you even had to overcompensate for you're not just going to hire me because I'm cute. I'm going to be good. But when I read that your dad had the insight to drop some knowledge on you like that is so dope. So tell me a little bit more about it. And then married your mom, a Korean woman. That took a little bit of bravery to just shed a little light on Pops.
Yeah, I would love to. Oh, I'd be honored to. So my parents met, I want to say, is there a Baldwin Hills Mall?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say they met there or so. They grew up in Crenshaw area, but my mom went to George Washington High School and they met and they had me. But my mom is actually, her dad is black and her mom is Korean. So she's mixed. And then my dad is Cherokee Indian, Caucasian, and black. So hence me, I did my DNA test and I found out I'm like 8% Japanese, I guess, obviously from the colonization in Korea. But so they met and they had two daughters, myself and my sister. My sister and I are completely opposite people. And so, but yeah, my dad, he was the coach of my softball team. I talked to him probably 3 times a week at least. But I mean, I know it comes from my great grandma Lena, because she and that side of my family is from past Christian Mississippi. And she moved out here and she provided, and she really was the matriarch of my family. And my dad tells these most epic stories about her cooking. And for me, I never met my great grandma Lena. And, I was raised a lot by my Korean immigrant grandmother, right? She was, I think they call them tiger moms or tiger, but she was like, it had me in them books like all the time, And so I feel like a lot of influence came about in different ways in different stages of my life. But my dad has been the most consistent, never diverted from anything but excellence in my eyeballs, because he's such a caring. I mean, the guy, he would give like an ant on the street his last bite of food. Like he's such a universal basic thinker, and not in the way of like minimizing his thoughts, in the way of, but minimizing the thoughts. Like he doesn't deal with any static. Like a lot of the social intangible things that society wants to put on you, he's just not here for it, and not in any kind of aggressive or bullshit way. He just doesn't live in that life. He lives in a universal perspective in the stars and the galaxies, and really has a larger grasp. So I think that, growing up, that was always really inspiring. I'd always see him doing these like juice cleanses, and he would like make our vitamins, like get actual empty pill capsules and like get powdered psyllium husk and all these things and make our vitamins, and like just really nurture us, my sister and I. And my mom. But food was always a big part, so there was that side of him, but not to say he didn't have an indulgent side as well. He would cook dinner, and his thing was Dad's famous spaghetti. And he'd always make this like kind of chili hot link spaghetti thing with cheddar cheese. I don't know. That was his thing. He always, it was like kind of weird, but kind of cute. I don't know.
That's not going to make its way on a Nyesha Arrington menu anytime soon.
Man, but he has an amazing palate, Brad. I tell you, growing up, I would just be in the kitchen all the time, making a mess and be cooking. And he would always be like, over time, obviously it evolved, but he would just pull out all these little distinct things in the food. And I'd be like, yeah.
I read somewhere where you said that when you were younger, it was hard for you to adapt to one culture or particular racial group. I'm a mixed ethnicity as well. My mom was Italian. My dad was black, but I quickly chose. I was like, I'm black. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. I had to. Yeah. My friends weren't having it. It was like, no. Yeah. Yep. And I'm happy to have done that. But, your dad with his free thinking and the kind of, in what he was inspired by, did you feel that kind of freed you in a way to express whatever you wanted to express? Because your food represents that. It's not confined to anything culturally specific, yet it's representative. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. Honestly, Brad, I think that it literally who I am is a conglomeration of all my life data, and it just got put in a jar, shaken up, and that's what it is. I think as a kid, I always knew I was a black woman, but like for me, even as a kid, I just think like society always wants to like put you in a box. And like, I think this is in my 30s now. I'm like, I feel like I have such a valuable opinion, and I always just want to be heard. And I think that comes from being suppressed for so long. And I always just want to feel valued, and it's not like an ego thing, but it's just because it's just enough just to listen. Like you don't have to agree or not agree, but I think for so long I've just had to fight for that space. And, so now I'm like, oh, that's okay. I think for me, it was like a weird place of like, how do I be in my skin? Because I think it wasn't that I didn't know who I was. I think other people were trying to put me in a box, and that bothered me mentally, like Black culture was like, oh, she doesn't talk a certain way, or she carries herself a certain way, so she's too good, or something, things like that. I think I was always aware of who I am, or who I was, but I think it was the pressure of other kids putting pressure on me that made me be like, wait, what? And so it wasn't like to an extreme extent. I wasn't like abused or bullied, but just, in elementary school, kids just don't know, and you're just learning and figuring stuff out. But, I just wanted to say, sorry, about the food tip. Please just ask me real quick, because it's something that's on my mental always. Is like my style of cooking, because how I cook, I feel like I really cook with thoughtfulness and intention. And, my food is very much, I love to cook through the seasons, because I love to be a proponent for our earth and Mother Nature, and just what makes sense from what grows in spring. Let's cook what grows in spring, and then try to implement flavors from around the world, because I don't only want to cook, soul food or have the media tell me that that's what I need to cook because I have dark skin. You know what I mean? That's definitely I'm going to get a little I'm going to push back to that. If I want to cook, I will, because I grew up eating gumbo. I grew up eating fried stuff, soul food. But I also think that there's it's not a sensitive topic around it, but I think, I think that it's a multifaceted topic, because when people talk about the ancestral diet and eating chitlins and the throwaway pieces of food, because that's all that was available, maybe I don't want to celebrate that, so I can only cook what my life journey has been. And so that was a big part of Korean influence. That was a big part of my food influence from Mississippi, and my family, and my aunts, all my aunties making they stayed making all the soul food. I'm telling you, the delicious collard greens, mac and cheese, my auntie, all my dad's sisters stayed cooking, cornbread, all amazing things I grew up with, which it plays a big part of my life. But, going to French cuisine, 3-star Michelin kitchens, I saw a whole new world of ingredients and techniques and flavors. I cooked next to gentleman from Japan, a woman from, wherever, and, Spain. And just being immersed in all of that, I think opened up my perspective on what my style is. And I always think, for me, I think my common denominator, if I had to choose one, it's rooted in celebration of culture, but not just my culture, so I think I'm able to make sense of that through the seasonality of what's in season at that moment.
That's really beautiful. I mean, the tapestry of who you are as a person, and having experienced that in your restaurants and knowing the kind of food that you do, it gets expressed in your food, and it's so unique and cool, and you don't shy away from anything. So it's not like you're trying to say, well, I'm better than cooking that, but you'll incorporate whatever you think is appropriate. But at the same time, you've given yourself license to be free to do what the hell you want to do. And I love that. I really, really love that. And the other thing you just said that just had me shaking my head, I forgot how young you are. You're still a baby in this industry. So let's talk a little bit about how you had to elbow your way around in some of those kitchens as a woman of color, male dominated environments. We've all heard some of the bad stories that have come out of our industry in the last few years that's gotten exposure and behavior that's frankly been going on for too long. But how did you navigate that, Nyesha?
Okay. Great question. I haven't wrote a book or anything, and it's not like I'm trying to write some kind of tell-all book or anything, because I really value my upbringing. I have grit, and I have perseverance, and I have thick skin, and I'm a strong person, so I endured a lot, but it's now we live in cancel culture. So you look at someone wrong and it's I'm not saying don't have a voice. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying it's a different world now. Cause I came up pre Me Too movement, pre any talks of inclusion. I was the girl who came in 4 hours before my shift and worked off the clock, and then stayed 3 or 4 hours late as an hourly employee. That's I'm not even in upper management. And so because I cared. I just value my craft first and foremost. I'm just grateful to be, as long as there's a value proposition in anything, I think you can get people to be inspired. I think when people can walk away with something and think, wow, I'm more valuable as a human or in my craft or emotionally, whatever. I think that's the important takeaway. So I always felt like I was receiving something. And for me, that exchange was not monetary all the time. Sometimes it was knowledge, because I wasn't a perfect person. I've messed up things. I burned things. I've led people wrong. I've made the wrong decisions. My path was a path of intention. I started out as a salad cook, pantry person. They call them pantry or garde manger, but cold prep. And then I worked my way up. Every position I've taken from culinary school, which I've only essentially worked in food and beverage. I worked at Taco Bell when I was 17 in high school. And from there I went to culinary school. And from there, salad, up to saute, line cook, sous chef, executive chef, worked overseas, chef partners. Like, I've done the entire spectrum. And so I have a good amount of data, right? Areas of opportunity for me to grow, and also many areas of triumph that, where I've been recognized for my work. And so, I don't think that I would have the sustainability package and wherewithal if I didn't go through that hard time, right? And I'm not advocating for it, but it was a different time, for me. Like I came up with the Anthony Bourdain generation, where it was like, work hard, play hard, and there was no talk about like mental health and like balance and all these new things that are happening now, it was a pirate ship, and so having to navigate that was very, very difficult. I remember nights where like I felt, it wasn't like I was like in the corner crying, that was for the freezer was for that. No, but like just being physically and emotionally broken. I mean, the industry, that's what they set out to do to young minds and cooks at that time in my life. They completely intentionally break you as a human and rebuild you the way they want, And so it's a mental game, it's a physical game, and it's an execution game. And the person who can do it the best wins, at the end of the day. That's kind of the puzzle. And I just remember the first time I walked into a Michelin-starred kitchen and a plate damn near flew past my head. And this is like a Bernardo plate, right? Like the plate itself cost $50 before you even put any food on it, like white porcelain. And like, I don't know what it was, but there was like an adrenaline rush that ran through my body. And I was like, this is where I need to be. And like, I don't know
somebody else would have ran for the exit, but I love it. I love it. So, Chef, you talk about, I hear your strength in the description of what those experiences were like. And it's not surprising to me, knowing you now, that you persevered given your personality. But you talk now about, hugs for the soul, spreading the message of love through food. We're moving into constantly we're evolving here, right? And we came out of a very difficult year, and we're not done yet. So 2021 still has some things up its sleeve, but we are trying to heal, right? And we're trying to heal the planet. And we're talking about, impossible meats. And I just read about some organism that's growing in Yellowstone Park that they're converting into food product and, to take the place of the burger and eventually. But when you, as a chef who loves food and cooks, where do you see the trends of health and how will you heal people through food, given that, we're ingesting a lot of stuff and some of it's good for us, some of it's not. Where are you on that?
Wow. I love this question, Brad. It's like, I'm so passionate about this because I had to heal myself. I really did. In 2019, I closed the restaurant and I broke up with my boyfriend at the time. And I really took a hard stop because it wasn't working, right? What was happening in my life up until that point, in those restaurants it stopped working. And so I was like, okay, whatever is not working needs to get off of my table and I need to reassess. And so I really did a lot of soul searching. And, I went to 6 countries, one which was Tel Aviv. I did a pop-up in Hong Kong. I went to New Zealand. I did a dinner, went to France, and Belize. And I really got serious about my health. I went pretty much raw vegan, not raw. For a moment I was there, but I was very plant-based, right? But then there would be these moments where I was tapping more into the alkaline diet because I started going down this rabbit hole of like research on how the body is affected by food and what fuels it and what energizes it. And so because I fell in love with optimization, right? Because I think when I had this bandwidth to free up, I said, okay, like, what's the next 10 years look like? This was all great first 15 years of my life. Like, what's the next 15 look like? And so I think to get to that point, I want to be mentally and physically sound. So I lost like 22 pounds that year. And it just all really came off naturally. I was working out a lot, but I wasn't like this madman trying to be like, I need to like lose 20. It just happened. I was like, oh, wow. Like, I was super fit. I gained about 8 pounds during COVID. I hate to admit, but I'm stronger than I've ever been because I think that more so my mental, my heart and my spirit are connected, And so I think when those things when you're in a flow state, humans can like achieve greatness. I think we really don't actually tap into a lot of our like neurological function. And a lot of that is because society actually doesn't really actually have our best interest in mind. A lot of times there's a lot of chemicals, a lot of fillers in these labels, and something as basic as that, reading labels is huge, and there's a lot of poison in a lot of our food and our water. And it actually disrupts cognitive thinking based on the pineal gland. And we need to be able to decalcify that. And that comes through deodorants, toothpastes, fluoride that inhibits, and I want to dare to say controls us from progressing. And so, I really lean into eating clean. I eat a lot less meat these days. And to answer your question, I think that's where we're going as a society. I think that what we're looking at with global warming, CO2 emissions, glyphosate, and all this shit that comes through our bodies, it has to hopefully end and come to a place to be rectified, and I would love to lead that conversation, but I think it's a push-pull thing because, there's a lot of lobbyists and people at the top that control how our food systems are being built for America. It's a big conversation.
Maybe I'll have you back if you would make some time and we can dive into that more fully, because I really think that that's you can't place enough importance on that conversation. So Nyesha, I knew this would happen. We're coming to a close here and it's happened much too quickly. But I just want to say that, I just really admire you. And I think that you are really one of the people that just deserves to be watched and listened to. You're in an important position, and your mind is, those of us who are fortunate enough to have listened to the things that you've articulated today. I think the future is really, really interesting for you. And I'm going to be watching to see where you go next and see what you do, what part of the world you end up in. But just please always let us know where you are, because we want to follow you.
Absolutely, Brad. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. So this part of the show I always look forward to. I get to check in with my dear friend and my childhood partner, Ambassador Shabazz. What's going on?
Fine, partner in crime, that is.
Well, a few crimes, misdemeanors.
Don't say everything.
Nope, don't tell.
Well, it's been really interesting, as always. You're listening to your guests before coming on is always really stimulating, and it sometimes moves me from what I think I'm going to talk about and encourages and inspires me to get into other things and or make the connection, which is really quite great about this work and reaching other people through this forum, Corner Table Talk. It's exciting. And it, of course, is going to lead me to how we move, because just listening to people, you find a new part of yourself based on what they share, what they reveal in their journeys. And it's really interesting. There was a young lady I spoke to a couple of months ago named Devon Reeves. I followed her because she was acknowledged as one of the young women in Black enterprise who bought a hotel in the Midwest, in one of the Hilton hotels. And I really got to listen to her. She was just as exuberant, young, unstoppable, like Chef Nyesha. And I've grown close. I always want to hear her buzz. And one of the things that she talked about is that across the United States, that of all the hotels that exist, only 2% are owned by African Americans. And, it's disturbing to her. And of course, it would be disturbing to me. I would venture to say that there are bed and breakfasts, the smaller spaces that exist that are not registered, that just haven't made the list. And so I'm going to try to follow that. Where are they? Who are they? The ones that we know of are probably in member nexuses with others. And we make sure that somehow or another this summer, while people are vacationing, between Memorial Weekend and Labor Day, to really get involved with staycations, since we can't, viably move, but you can get in a car with your family and you can dial up these places. And, there's a location, it's a historic a mansion in the Mount Vernon section of Baltimore. Now, I'm from Mount Vernon, New York, but, I guess George Washington got around, so he's kind of like named a few places. And this is called the Ivy Mansion, and it's owned by Eddie and Sylvia Brown. It is the number 6 luxury hotel in the United States, bed and breakfast, only 18 rooms, but exquisite. They have the Magdalena restaurant. I mean, I've been chasing them down, wanting to go for the last couple of years. Pre-COVID, I have to always remember 2020 interfered, but certainly in 2019 when I learned about them. And it's going to be one of my stops when I get back to DC. All I read about it is just fantastic. So I would encourage people to check out Baltimore. So often we hear about our urban cities and we talk about the cry, but we never talk about where the joy is, where the successes are. And I want to move in that direction. We've really come out of a time where we certainly know where the limp is, where the wound is, where the ache, where the reconstruction is. But let's talk about the reconstruction or the revivals and who's been doing the work and how to bridge that gap.
So tell us the name of the place again in Baltimore.
It's called the Ivy Hotel.
The Ivy Hotel.
The address is 205 East Biddle Street, and it's in the Baltimore it's in Baltimore, but it's in the Mount Vernon section of Baltimore. And I just say go online. They're on Open Table, so you can make a reservation. But they also have a spa. If you don't stay overnight, if you live in the region, just go and patronize.
I love that. I think, as we're gently starting to reemerge, it's going to be so wonderful to connect with people in some of these places that you're going to be illuminating, and just to see one another again, and be in the same room, even just from across the room, even if it needs to be at a somewhat more distant space than it was prior. But I'm really intrigued by this bed and breakfast place.
Yeah, nice, wonderful husband and wife on the mature side, and this is kind of their baby in the backyard down there in Maryland, DC, Virginia area. And, it takes nothing to just drive the half hour, the 45 minutes for a brunch even. And another location, not a boutique hotel, but a restaurant in Harlem. About 3 years ago when I was in New York, I was meeting my friend Natalie Molina Nino, and she said, I'm staying uptown, and can you get in a cab and meet me at 139th and Edgecombe? I said, well, that's my stomping grounds. I'm from Convent on 140th. What's over there that I don't know about? You kind of, New Yorkers, we're really patriotic. And if there's a new spot somewhere we didn't know about, you feel as if you missed the memo. That's not good. Yeah. So I went.
Especially in your immediate hood.
Like across from my bank, But it's called The Edge on the corner of Edgecombe and 139th, and between 139th and 40th. And that is also a historic building at 101 Edgecombe Avenue. In that building, it hosted a lot of the meetings of African Americans during the Harlem Renaissance. And this place was found by two siblings. They were in different parts of their careers. One is indeed a celebrated chef, and the other was a realtor. And they decided that they would scout and settle as proud New Yorkers who of Jamaican and British descent. And when I tell you I walked into this little cozy spot, you have to make a reservation because it's not gigantic inside. But when I walked in there, oh my God, between the music, the smells, and you know me, I started to feel the Caribbean thing. When I look at the menu, they have, it's broken into New York, Jamaica, and England. So I wasn't drawn to the British food as yet because I could smell the other seasonings. So I did have some ackee and saltfish, which is an ode to Jamaica. And the food looks like a scrambled egg kind of dish. So it gives you a sense of a brunch, the ackee. And the ackee actually comes as a fruit that was really brought to the Caribbean from West Africa, from Ghana. And then I had my avocado toast because I do have a penchant, avocado in any form. And so I'm a person that goes to these restaurants to get sides or pieces of different things on the menu, which was really enjoyable. And I have to say, in addition to the fact that their father is the one who brews all of their Caribbean drinks, is famously the Jamaican sorrel, but I got the ginger beer.
Give me a ginger beer, a meat patty, although I'm eating mostly vegetarian patties now.
Yeah.
Oh, and some plantains, and I'm happy. So we've got the Edge in Harlem.
That's right.
And the place in Baltimore again, that's the bed
The
and breakfast?
Ivy Hotel.
The Ivy Hotel.
Yeah.
So Baltimore, Harlem, 2 must stops if anybody's driving around the East Coast this summer and looking for some cool places.
And the owners are on the spot. Oh, the owners are right there, just like you are. When people come into your places, they're saying, "Where's Brad?" You know, and so it's that part of the hospitality of meet, greet, engage it precedes the food sometimes. Just seeing the faces.
Well, thank you so much for that. And we're looking forward to getting back out there again and rubbing some elbows. We miss each other. So let's do that. Yeah. Get out and support some of these businesses that you're hearing about. They're welcome. They'll be welcoming you and happy to see you coming. So Ambassador, thank you so much. And go drink some green tea. I know you're ready to soothe that throat. You've been on the phone all morning with principals all over New Jersey and helping out the school system. So go do your thing. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Corner Table Talk is hosted by Brad Johnson, produced by Brad and Linda Ailes Johnson, coordinating producer Lauren Turner, theme music Life Goes On by Bryce Vine, executive producers Omar Thompson, Andrew Kalb, and Ken Johnson. Find the Corner Table Talk podcast wherever you get your podcast. Follow, subscribe, rate, and leave a comment. Corner Table Talk is a Say It Loud Network production.